Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Scott Thompson here for another session of Stock Investing for Beginners. Excited to be here with you. The bell just went off and the markets just closed. Give a shout out to Barb, who's in the chat. She'll be handling any questions that I can't get to, so feel free to post those in the chat there. Give a shout out also to Jay Richardson and Richard and Simone and Rojo and Scott Luck and everybody else that's here today. Appreciate Kevin. Appreciate you taking some time out of your afternoon to be here. Those of you that are watching on the archive, welcome to you as well. If you have some questions that come up while you're watching the archived or recording, go ahead and post those questions in the YouTube comment section down below, and I'll respond to those. I look at those basically every single day. Our objective today is to add some additional tools to speed up the process. I'm kind of old school. I do like looking through the watch list every day, just looking for those buy signals, get to know the trends of the stock and, whether they're really volatile or kind of sideways or whatever. But, a few weeks ago, we introduced a few tools, one of which was a scan that we can run in the top performing sectors and then look for those buy signals. So today we're going to add a few additional tools that will hopefully speed up this process. But before we do that, let me go ahead and remind everybody that our presentation today is for informational purposes only, not a recommendation of any particular strategy or stock that we look at today. We are looking at the paper money version. We'll also use the live version of the demo account because we're going to have a scan with studies in it, and that scan only works in the live Thinkorswim. So we have still a demo account, but we have a live version of the paper and the paper money version. Though there are some significant differences there. That's one of them. We also be talking about some stop orders today. Remember or realize there's no guarantee that execution of a stop order will be at or near the stop price. Remember too that all investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Let me go ahead and jump in here. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. But I also want to show you just the lessons that we do. We went through all of these lessons back in October. We're kind of doing some bonus sessions now before I start the lesson series over again, refining the process of the trading plan that we introduced actually in lesson number 4, which we call the 2 green arrows. It's a pretty simple plan. There's lots of links down in the description of some scripts for the charts and some other things that we're going to talk about today. I also posted some new ones there in the chat there at the top. So if you scroll up, you should be able to see those new scripts in there. And then just remind everybody the scripts are not guaranteed for accuracy. And then, of course, we've shown many times in this webcast how to find these on our YouTube channel. So just go to the YouTube Trader Talks page and then scroll down and you'll see the stock investing basics, and our most current lesson series will always be right there. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen with the Thinkorswim. And one of the first things that basically part of your daily routine is to check your open positions. And so, we got stopped out of some of the healthcare stocks. I don't know if you saw that earlier in the week. There was a huge drop. We had CVS, and we got stopped out of that earlier in the week when kind of some of those healthcare companies dropped. Also very interesting is healthcare's been in the top performing sectors, and it got knocked out of the top 3. With that big drop. But what we've been doing first in our webcast is checking our open positions, and that's been a little bit of a tedious process. If you like looking at charts, I guess it's not too bad. But the process has been like identifying the stocks that you own. I have a watch list of those stocks that I've created, and then I link that up. If it's unlinked, then nothing happens. But if we link this up here like number 1, and then we go to our charts, and I have that linked up to number 1 also, then when I click on any of these symbols, that symbol comes up, right? So the process that we've used up till today, and today I'm going to give you a tool that's really cool to make this so it's a lot faster. The very first thing I want to show is, our trading plan has been to buy uptrending stocks that are in the S&P 500 when they're above a rising 50-day moving average. And so, that's basically what we look for on the buy signal. On the sell side, we've just been looking for the stock to actually close below the moving average And usually when that happens, the MACD is already red. So like you can see over here, we got to close below the moving average. When that happens, that's an action item for us in our plan. We generally are going to move our stop up when and if we see that. That's the basic plan. And then we've also talked about that you could move your stop every time you get a new, essentially two green arrow buy signal. And we've seen that on MU, we've seen that on Johnson & Johnson, we've seen that on some of the other stocks that we've traded over time. But what I want to do today is, instead of doing this process, which I'll go through kind of the old way, right? Okay, the stock's above the moving average, the MACD's green, we're done with our analysis, right? We don't have anything to do here necessarily. I could click on the next stock and the symbol. I can see the stock's above the moving average. The MACD in this case is red, but I really still don't have anything to do here until it closes below the moving average. Well, what if there was a way that I didn't have to look at all 14 or 20 or 15 or 60 or how many ever stocks you had? What if I didn't have to look at all of these symbols individually? What if I could just add something on my monitor page, like a column header here, that would tell me instantly whether the stock was above or below the moving average? And so I created this this little chart or monitor tab extra, this little extra tool, and there's a link for it there in the at the top of the chat. You can see it there, and there's also a link in the description. But if I click on this, let me show you again how to get here. So go to your monitor tab, and trade price, that one's not a normal one. You have to add that. But to add anything to the columns here, you click on this little gear, and you can have all of these different things in there. And what I did is I created this column header called 50 SMA. And so if I add that over here, and what this does basically is a really simple script. And Mike Fairborn on Thursdays does a ThinkScript webcast every week. And we have a whole bunch of different methods to use there. If you want to go learn more about ThinkScripting, go see Mike over there on Thursdays. But what this does is basically says, hey, if it's above the moving average, put a 1 and make it green. If it's below the moving average, put a 0 and make it red. So it's really simple script, really simple column header. And if I click OK, then what happens is it loads this up here. And basically all I have to do is I can come to my monitor tab and say, well, all of my stocks in my portfolio are above the 50-period moving average, and they're not guaranteed for accuracy or time. Sometimes there's little glitches there, so you do want to be able to check that. But in this case, every stock that we've got is above the 50-day moving average, and basically I'm done with my monitoring my open positions. I don't have anything to do here. Now, I could go in and say, well, do I have a new two green arrow buy signal, and I could adjust my stops up? But that's something that I might do like once a week, at the end of the week, on the weekends, where go take some time and just take a look at those positions. But this is a very, very fast way now to say, oh, all of the stocks are above the moving average. I don't really have anything necessarily to do here based on the basic rules of the plan. All right, does that make sense? So looks like there was a question about the webinar still being on. It is. So hopefully that's there. Scott says we've got the earnings reaction. Maybe we'll take a look at some of those there after we get through our material. All right. So if there's any questions regarding, this little function here, let me show you one more time how to get it. Go to the monitor tab, click on the little gear, and then if you save that script, maybe I'll show you how to do that. It'll show up in your columns over here. It should be 50 SMA. And I'm just going to go in the chat and grab the script that I posted in here. So it's the one, here's the column header for the monitor page. So I'm just going to copy that script, and let me go up and show you, once you have the script, you go up here to setup, go to open shared item, and then you just copy that script in there. Okay. And then you hit preview, and it should have the name there for you. And then, I like to open shared item afterward. You can import it. You can give it a name like we did here. You can import that, and then it'll show up on this list. Does that make sense? So that's how you bring that in there. And hopefully that'll save you some time, speed up the process a little bit. All right. So we did share that there, DuPi, and that's that one. All right. Now let's go through now our process. Last couple weeks ago, we introduced a tool to do a quick market posture review, take a look, a method of determining which sectors are outperforming the S&P 500 and identify the top 3, and then we'll run a scan in there. But let me go through the market posture step. Now this script also in the description below. You can go find it in there, but it's a 3-grid chart that has the SPX on each of them. It has a long-term chart, a 3-year weekly chart, a 6-month daily chart, and then a 3-month daily chart for each different time frame, long-term, intermediate term, and short-term. And so once you load up that grid, just do a right click and then do a maximize sell on the first one. And what we're trying to do is just determine basically what the trend is for those 3 time periods. Is it bullish, bearish, or neutral, or a combination thereof? Okay, and this is really fast and really easy. If the 10 periods above the 40, we're going to be long-term bullish, period, done. You know, that's all it is. All right, and then we go on to the next chart. Now, this one here is kind of interesting. The method is to look at the direction, the 30-period moving average, the red line, to look at the direction that's going. So this one's starting to head up again. So if you wanted to be intermediate bullish, you could do that. It was kind of oscillating a little bit, and this one takes a little bit more, analysis. But if we look at the last low that we had here on the SPX, it was actually a lower low. Do you guys see that? So we're coming off a lower low in the trend, and the way we define a trend is higher highs and higher lows as an uptrend, lower lows and lower highs as a downtrend, but a combination of those, like lower low, now we have a higher high, right? Intraday, we had a higher high. In fact, an all-time high, 7,000 on the SPX here. We didn't close. Looks like we're kind of closing about the highest we've done right there, pretty similar. So this is how, like, some traders might look at this interpreting the intermediate trend, because we're coming off an intermediate lower low but making a higher high. They might say something like neutral to bullish. That would be their definition of the posture or their trend. And so, like, anytime you have neutrality, or maybe one of these time frames is different than the others, sometimes people a little bit more conservative in their investing. Maybe they go in with like half a position instead of a full position. These are some ways to use this posture idea. Okay. Then the next chart we go to has the Williams fractal candle in there, and it has this red and green arrows indicating short-term highs and lows. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't get all of the short-term highs and lows. There's some characteristics about that fractal that have to come into play to actually put an arrow on the chart, but it works well enough. And the purpose here is to identify higher highs and higher lows, or higher series of arrows or lower series of arrows. But again, here we see this green arrow that we had a few weeks ago was certainly lower than the previous 3 lows. And so that was a short-term lower low. And we could have even said we're short-term bearish, because in my opinion, I think this was a short-term lower high here on the 15th, and then we made another lower low. So we had a high, low, lower high, lower low. We started a short-term downtrend, but that didn't last very long. In fact, yesterday we kind of made a higher short-term high than we had, and today we made another one intraday. We didn't close much higher, but so right now we're sitting at a series of kind of lower low but higher high. And again, most technical traders would say, well, they're neutral to bullish because of the new high in the short term. All right, so that's our market posture. Again, just a quick review of how those work. I took quite a long time to go. You should be getting, now we've done this for 3 weeks in a row, where you should be able to find these postures fairly quickly. Okay. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool is the sector, right? The next thing that we've done is we took this sector indices watch list. Now, there was a question that came up, and I posted the answer in the YouTube comments, but there's a pre-made or a public watch list called sector indices. Okay, any of these public watch lists, we can't really modify or change those. Those are just locked in. So what you have to do in order to create the watch list that I have is I just basically copied all of those symbols, and then I did create watch list, put those symbols in, and then added the SPX to it so I could have my own personal list that has all the sector indices with the XPX, because I want to compare those sectors to that. So, we created this, personal watch list. You'll have to do the same there. They don't want us to share the watch list itself with you, but you can go create that, and I just showed you how to do that. But once we have that, I like to detach that gadget and then just make it a little bit bigger and see. Now, this column header is called the 3-month percent change. There's a link for this down in the description as well. We showed how to add that a couple weeks ago. But if the sort is based on those symbols over here now. But if I click that column header once, it'll sort from low to high. And if I click it again, it'll sort from high to low. And so the SPX is right here. We can see the SPX is up about 1.26% in the last 3 months. But what sectors are outperforming? Let's get you guys to participate a little bit. If you can see, what are the top 3 sectors right now in the last 3 months? So over here, I've got a description column that I've added so we know, because I don't know what the numbers mean, but I do now know how to read, right? So energy is still number 1. So let's put that over here. Energy is number 1. What was number 2? Let's go grab our watch list. Looks like materials is number 2, and communication services is number 3. And industrials is still very close, and so is healthcare. So healthcare was number 3 the last couple of weeks, and so it's just dropped a little bit below communication services and industrials. But I'm going to go ahead and put materials over here, and then communication services. And this is the current top 3 webcasts. And so what we're doing is using top-down analysis to identify, first, what the market trends are. Second, which sectors are outperforming the market. And then, the fun part is go run a scan to find stocks in these sectors. Now, again, we've done this a couple times, but this scan, because it has a study component to it, I'm using the live version of our demo account. And so that's the only place that these study filters work. If you tried to load this study set into your paper money, you get an error message. It doesn't work. So it has to be in the live version of your Thinkorswim, and you can run the scan there, save the watch list, and then share the watch list with yourself. And then you could add that watch list to the, your paper money. But the idea here is we want to scan, the name of the scan is Two Green Search in the Sector. Again, there's a link for this scan down there in the description. And then we're going to choose here, scan in. We're going to change all stocks to by industry and just use those top 3. So here's energy, select energy. And then what we've been doing, the original plan was to look in the S&P 100, those top 100 US companies. And so you can say intersect with, come down here to public and do S&P 100. And so now this generally will narrow that field down enough that you don't have to look at a gazillion different stocks. But let's go ahead and scan there. And right here in the S&P 100, we got 3 stocks to come up: COP, CVX, and XOM. And so this is where now we can go and check each one of these stocks individually and see which one makes sense to maybe purchase, to just verify that it has a buy signal. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go look at our COP stock here in our group. Okay, so first I might check my open positions, and I don't have COP, and I actually have very few energy stocks here. So this one might be one. It's like, hey, I can get some diversification if I add this into my watch list or into my portfolio. Again, not a recommendation. We're just looking at it here. And I want to go back to my study set, and I want to show you, going to load in the two green arrows. So here's our 50-day moving average. Here's our MACD. Actually, let me load the style in. It's a little bit better. Okay, this one has the arrows on it. Okay, so here we are with COP, and we can see the MACD went green a couple days ago, and the moving average is rising, and so we have a green arrow on COP. This is a valid buy signal based on our very simple rule set. Some people, a little technical analysis here, some people would say, well, I'm going to draw some resistance lines. You know, some people look at these closes and say, well, we had a little bit of a triangle pattern. Do you guys see that? They call that a symmetrical triangle, and it's usually a bullish continuation pattern. And so when it breaks out of that, that would be a technical breakout buy signal. But in this case, we have a green arrow on the moving average and on the MACD. So it's still a valid buy signal based on our rules. Okay, so we're going to try to do as many of these as we can today. So COP came up. I'm going to write this down. We're going to take some notes. COP, and usually we're going to put an entry price just at the closing price, 101.39 in this case. So our entry is 101.39. Now, where do we set the stop? Those of you that have been here in the class for a long time, if you're brand new, you may not know the answer to this, but where's that initial stop go based on the rules that we went over in lesson 4 several weeks ago? Yeah, we just put the initial stop goes 1% below the moving average. And so what we've done, you know, if I put my cursor on the moving average, let me change my drawing tool here. So like the moving average, I can see that value. I can see it in a couple places. One, if I have my cursor there, I can go right up to the top, and the number right there at the top shows that value. Let me see, is this set up to where it's on larger? Let me, yeah, it's about as big as I can go. Okay, so the moving average you can see is at 93.81. And that number's like right over here on the right side too. But here's the other tool I wanted to share with you. This one, again, the link's there in the it's in the description. It's also at the top of the chat here. But check this out. This I thought was just, I should have done this a long time ago, and I apologize for not doing it. But check this out. If I go to studies and I go down here to load studies, if I put a 1% moving average envelope, then I don't have to calculate with my calculator where the stop goes. So check this out. I'm going to put this on here, this little purple line. And again, this script it's in the chat and it's already there. But look at this. If I put my cursor on that day, let me give us some extra space so we can see this. But if I put my cursor today and I wanted to buy, you know, COP at 101.39, I can just look straight up and see where my stop is going to go. Based on the rules, 92.87. You guys see that number? Just right up, straight up there. So the 1% envelope is right below that moving average by 1%, which is where we'd set our stop. So in this case, 92.87 is where we're going to put our stop loss. And so we're going to put in here S 92.87. So now we're all ready to go. And we just go over here to the trade page, or I mean, I can even right click right here, right click, buy custom with stop. That puts up this order window. And this one's trading at 101. You know, we're going to put 101.39 for our entry here. And we could ballpark that. I mean, we could do 5 shares would be about $505. We've been setting a maximum of $500. That may be different for you, but we'll go ahead and do 5 shares. You know, we'll call it close enough to 500. And then we're going to lock that link up so it has the same buy and sell. And then we're going to go in here and set our stop. We said where? 92.87, which is just that moving average envelope right there. You can't see it because it's blocked off over there. But if we shrink that back down, again, I can put my cursor 92.87. Just go in there and change that, 92.87. Then we want our orders to be good till canceled. I can lock those up as well. hit confirm and send, and then say, make sure, this is pretty close to 500 on our buying power. We know it's a stop order, no guaranteed to get filled at 92.87. That's just going to trigger our sell order, and that could be filled significantly lower. We put it in our group and send that order off, and now I've got a working order for tomorrow. If the stock gaps up, it'll have to pull back down a little bit to fill that. Okay, so that's COP. Now, ExxonMobil, that was one that came up, XOM, on the search, right? We did the search there, and ExxonMobil was in that group, and so was Chevron. Let's take a quick look at those. One of the things that comes up frequently when you're following some plan rules is like, well, is it too late to the dance? We talked about this a little bit last time. Ideally, what we're trying to do is buy on the green arrow, like right here. You see that? There's the green arrow day. The moving average was rising. The stock was bouncing off support. If you like to talk about bull flag patterns, go visit Barb. She loves these patterns in her class on Monday and Friday, but that's kind of what we're trying to catch. And the easiest way, okay, listen to this. If you don't get anything else out of our session today, listen to this. The easiest way to catch this is to see the setup. And the setup is when the moving average is rising and that stock's pulling back maybe about 2, 3, 4 days. Like when that starts to happen, technical traders get a little bit excited because they're thinking, hey, if this trend continues and that bounces, that's that buy signal. Now, they don't always work and they're not always profitable, but that's what we're trying to catch. And hopefully we catch this type of price action, right? Now, the question is this still a valid buy signal? Okay, what's the answer for you guys? Okay, what's the answer? Is this still valid based on our rules? Well, the answer is yes, it is, but it just feels a little bit late, doesn't it? Feels a little bit late to the dance, and so some traders will just say, you know what, I'm going to wait for the MACD to turn red, and then I'm going to buy it again when it goes green if the trend still's up. But there isn't anything wrong with this. In fact, in the survey that we had yesterday, someone had asked, on stocks like MU and ExxonMobil and some of these other stocks have been going up for so many days in a row. We've been waiting for a pullback and none of them have come. It just keeps going up. What do we do with that? Well, I want to do one thing with ExxonMobil today to demonstrate what you could do, okay? Now, we're willing to invest $500 in our positions, right? So one solution on stocks that just keep going up is like, I think all of us would have looked at this and think, oh yeah, if I was back there, I would have bought it. And then some of you would have said, well, there was a high there. I would have liked to see it close above the high. Well, that happened here on the 13th. And so, we could have bought it there. And then it just kept going up. And once it went up there for a little bit, we probably saw this red candle and we thought, oh, there's the top. It'll pull back a little bit. And as soon as it pulls back into that 125 level, boy, we're going to buy that, right? But it didn't do that. It just kept going. So here's a solution. It's not the only solution, but this is one way that you can do this. It's called scaling in. So I don't know if this is going to go up to 150 over the next 3 weeks or back down to 125. It doesn't really matter. I just want to act on my own buy rules. Now, I know I'm late. Okay, why am I late? Well, because the green arrow happened about, 3 weeks ago? But if it keeps going up and I'm tired of watching it keep go up, you could scale in like 1 or 2 shares or like a half or a third or a fourth of your position at a time. So let's go ahead and do that together. Okay, so jot this number down. This is our stop, 120.42. Okay, so we're going to go back up here. We did COP. So ExxonMobil, we're going to indicate we're late. Entry is just today's closing price. So entry 137.58. Stop. Oh, I can't remember. What did we say it was? I'll shrink that back down. So 120.42. And now we have the information that we need to place the trade. We can just right click, buy custom with stop. But here we're going to scale in. We're just going to go in with 1 share, which is about a fourth of our normal position here. And so we'll put our stop order in 120.42. We'll leave the buy there at the 137.58, the closing price. And we'll make both of those good till canceled. Oops, that moved. So 120.42. And we hit confirm and send. Realize that's a stop order, put it in our group, and we send that off, and we're scaling in. And some traders might even put a little note to themselves, like a drawing tool, put a little note down here that just says, scaling in because we're late. And you can have it either have the whole text there, you can right click on it and just show the icon. And then when you move your cursor over it, it'll pull up what you wrote there. Kind of a cool little tool there. All right, but that's ExxonMobil. And those were the energy stocks. So we've got time to go do a couple more scans. So let's go back to our scan. Again, this is in the live version of Thinkorswim. There's a question about institutional traders exploiting retail investor stops. There's a lot of discussion on that. Here's what I've experienced myself over the 20 years of doing this. Okay, everybody knows where stops go, right? People set stops below the moving averages. They set stops below what are called support and resistance. Generally speaking, I don't think institutions necessarily gun for those, but they know where they're going to be. So they might put limit orders right there about where your stop is. But, there's so much trading going on, so many shares, millions and millions of shares. And so if you're really concerned about using a stop order like we are in this example plan, then you could say, well, I'll just keep an eye on it and use what's called a mental stop. If it closes below that level, then I will manually close my own trade out. My experience with that, talking with many, many investors and traders over the years, is they don't do very well at that. Once it hits that level, they start thinking, well, sure, that was support, but there's another support down here at 90. I'll get out when it closes below 90, and then it goes below 90, and then they're thinking, well, I really don't want to take this big a loss. I'll get, if it breaks this next support at 80, then I'll get out of it. So just be really careful there. Is it Silvermine that asked that question? It's just you either use a stop and understand how it works, or you don't use stops and you have some more discipline. I found that most people don't have a lot of discipline, so the stop orders tend to work more effectively for them, but you can choose what you want to do on your own. All right, so let's go back over to the scan here. 2 green arrows. Which other sector? Right? What was the next one? Materials, right? So we go into materials, and you could go into individual ones. We're just going to go select all material stocks, and we have our scan up there, and we're going to run scan, and it says no matching symbols. Now, there's no matching symbols in the S&P 100. So how could we do that? How could we maybe modify this search in order to get a little bit bigger move for it, right? Well, let's take a look here. Instead of S&P 100, and that's kind of again, that's our baseline rule. But if I wanted to expand that out, I could go to S&P 500, and then I could run the scan there. And now I have several stocks here in the materials sector that's been outperforming the S&P 500, and I could look at each of these individually. Okay. Now, I'm not going to take the time to look at each of these individually because I did that already. But for homework, I'd encourage you to look at each one of these stocks and then ask yourself, is that a valid buy signal based on the rules? Guess what? We could even come in here. Now, the search says that it should be above the moving average. But you could come in there and customize it if you wanted to add that 50 SMA. Oh, it's not on the scan results one. So you could go in and see if all of those are there. The one I wanted to look at was MOS, this one here, Mosaic. It's a fairly inexpensive stock, so that bodes well for like maybe a new investor where it's not so expensive to get in there, like $184 a share. It's only $28 a share. So let's go look at Mosaic and see if this one has a buy signal based on our rules. It came up in the search that we ran, so it should have 2 green arrows on it. Again, not always going to be the case. Sometimes things change. And so what we're trying to do here with Mosaic is get an idea. First off, is the moving average rising? Okay. Now it looks like it is, I don't have to look too hard to see that it looks like it was lower a couple weeks ago than it is today. So I'm going to argue that that's a rising moving average. I could put my cursor on it today. Today, the moving average is at 25.21. Yesterday, it was 25.16. The day before, 25.05. So guess what? It's rising. The MACD. Now, the MACD's been green forever. Looks like back in November, this was a green arrow. And how long are the green arrows valid? Well, the green arrows are valid until they turn red. So the MACD is green, and it's been green forever. Now, it is falling. And so some traders and investors will look at that and say, well, it's going to go red. So I'll just wait for it to turn green again. Well, guess who did that? A whole bunch of people, right? Where they thought it was going to go red, it just didn't. Now the trend, you can see the trend was kind of flat here for a little while. It broke the resistance right here. Now, based on our rules, the moving average was still falling right there. You see that still kind of going down. So based on our very simple rules, this would not have been a valid buy signal, even though it had two green arrows. The moving average is not rising. That trend is not technically up yet, right? So what normally would we wait for? We wait for the stock to make that new high, which it starts to do here, right? It's a little bit higher high. We'd like to have it come down, and put this in your notes if you're new. Old resistance might become new support. So we're kind of looking for that $26 area to be our new support. So when the stock moves forward, we'd like to see it hold. Oh, there it did. So right there, it kind of jiggled around right when it broke out. It fell back below when it made another short-term higher high here on the 15th, came back. And right there, that type of candle where it has a small body and long shadows on top and front, or top and bottom, that's called a spinning top. And that could be a signal that, hey, that support may hold. We got a really nice bounce the next day. That's that hold. Close above the high of the low day. Right there, the moving average, you can see it started rising a little bit. We were at 24.88 there, 24.87, 24.87. So just barely ticked up. So theoretically, that met our buy rule. The moving average now rising. Some people would still wait. And so, we've come over, we're kind of pulling back a little bit. This might come down a little bit more, but right now, the MACD is green. The moving average is rising in green, and the closing price was 28.14. And guess what? We put our cursor there. Let's shrink this down. Put our cursor there. Where's the stop going to go on this trade? Well, 1% below that moving average, 24.96. So let's go put that over here. So this is Mosaic. Stop, 24.96. Let's put our entry price. E for entry, it says 28.14 was the close. And this one, we'll have to either use our calculator, because if we wanted to go in with a full position, right, we could go in there with a full position, $500, divide by 28.14, and that equals 17 shares that we could buy, right? So how do we do the purchase? Again, what we're trying to do here with these different tools I'm giving you is to speed up this process, okay? So there's a comment there about the intrinsic value from A218. So intrinsic value is a fundamental component. We've covered that in lesson 5. We talked about some of the fundamental components. There's a link in the description on what we call the intrinsic value calculator. And so that goes through a process of determining that intrinsic value, which I haven't done today, but sure. The intrinsic value for someone who's more fundamentally based, and it's a great tool to see if that stock's undervalued or overvalued. So great comment there, A2018. Thanks for bringing that up. And you can see that. There's a comment about the two green arrows. Can you please explain about the two green arrows? So the green arrows are really just what's called a buy signal. If you go up here to your studies and you edit studies, and you go in there and click on the gear, there's a little link that says show breakout signals. There's some more information here on anytime you see a question mark, you can click on that and get what that is. But the yes just means put a green arrow there. And all that means, okay, it's just a fancy way to say the stock has closed above the moving average. That's it. That's all the green arrow means. Let me zoom out a little bit. If it closes below the moving average, like it did over here, we're going to see a red arrow, and that's going to stay red all the way until it turns green. MACD, same thing. If the MACD histogram bar goes below that 0 line, which is right over here, that's a 0 below, so that's a red arrow, and it stays red until what? Until the green arrow goes back above that 0, and that green arrow will stay green until it turns red. Okay, so that's what those go. All right. So let's take a look here now. Let's go ahead and purchase Mosaic. And we have our stop, entry, and target. We do a right click on the chart. We do a buy custom with stop. And we said we could do 17 shares. And we're just going to put a limit order to buy at the closing price. Now, again, there's no guarantee the limit order will fill. And then we're going to set our stop. We set it $24.96, which is where that 1% envelope is at, $24.96. Okay, so we're going to put that in there, 24.96. Make those good till canceled. Hit confirm and send. And then usually we just want to double check. 28.14 looks correct. 24.96 looks correct. Our buying power effect will tell us, how much money we're using for this particular trade, and we want that to be below $500 for our example trade. Then it's 478, so that works. And then if you have a group set up like we do on the monitor tab for 2 green arrow trades, then we could put that in there and we're good to go. We hit send order. So there's where we did today, folks. We did a lot of stuff today. I showed you how to add this 50 period column moving average. I showed you on the chart this upgraded version. Now, again, this link is in there if you want to add or put this chart on your save the chart. It's there for you. The script is there. But we added a 1% moving average to save us some calculation time. We ran our search again. Again, the search only works in the live version of Thinkorswim because it has these studies in there. We showed how to scan in different areas. We didn't get a chance to scan in the communication services, but you could do that on your own. There actually only one stock came up when I ran it earlier today. And we reviewed those open positions that we have, and I showed you a fast way to do that. So hopefully that's helpful for you today, everybody. Want to remind everybody the presentation was indeed for educational purposes. These are the different lessons. You can go find those individual lessons and individual recordings on our Trader Talks YouTube page. And, appreciate you taking some time to be here with me today. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks. We'll see you.